Hello and welcome to this month's edition of the Whisky Investment Podcast. I'm Alwynne Gwilt, and this month we've got a really exciting guest in the form of Francisco Rosa, better known as Chico, who is the whiskey maker from the exceptionally exciting Fielden Distillery here in England. Chico, we can go with Chico?
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Chico, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Alwynne. It's great to be here.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming down to join us and talk a little bit more about the amazing stuff you're doing at Fielden. I'm super excited. For those people out there who maybe haven't heard of Fielden yet, can you give a bit more background on what you do there and also a bit more about Fielden?
Yeah, sure. Fielden, it's a really exciting project, and we really like to see ourselves as whiskey makers, a bit as winemakers who produce also wine in a way.
Yes,
so
yep.
we look at every single stage of the process from the fields to the bottle. So we prime ourselves for exploring different and mainly sustainable ways to grow grains, looking to all varieties of grains, studying how grains used to grow in the past, and how to promote a sustainable farming for the future. So my role at Fielden is to basically make the whiskey in a way. So I've been involved since the beginning. And I passed through, let's say, just assistant distiller into head distiller, managing production, and now my job is mainly look to the fields, understand what raw materials we are working with, and all the way to deciding how maturation goes, and also blending and coming up with expressions that we released so far.
Yeah, wow. So really a full 360 view across the whole process, which is, I think in a lot of distilleries, people maybe on the blending side or the whiskey making side don't necessarily get that opportunity to also understand what's happening with those grains as they begin in the field. We'll talk a bit about the regenerative farming aspect that you're doing a little bit later in the podcast. But to begin, you said you've obviously been with Fielden since the beginning. For those people who maybe haven't heard of Fielden, it was originally the Oxford Artisan Distillery Toad,
Yes,
so that's kind of
correct.
where it began, its roots, and then now it's transformed into Fielden. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. So the Oxford Artisan Distillery started 7-8 years ago almost,
Yep.
And I joined straight in the beginning when production started, fresh out of uni studying distilling, and we were producing whiskey, but also we had to pay the bills as well. Generate some revenue, so we also were producing a vodka and gin, and we were always based on the farming and growing grains around the distillery, 50 miles maximum. We were exploring heritage varieties of rye mainly, but also wheat and barley, to a point that we expanded so much that it didn't make so much sense to us to be called Oxford, as we were growing grains in Norfolk, basically from Cornwall to the north. Fielden is the evolution of Oxford Artisan Distillery to a point that really get us focused on the fields,
on the grains and the actual the basis. And your background, so you obviously studied whiskey making, but you come from, is it a Portuguese wine making background?
Yes.
Wine family?
I guess the reason, or one of the reasons why I'm in whiskey, is because one of the things that drive me in life is experiences, and especially experiences through flavor. And I was lucky to be born in a winemaking family in Portugal, and in very early ages, I basically, since I remember, I was like running around casks,
smelling barrels,
yes, and bicycling down the vineyards and so on, and probably before I actually was supposed to be allowed to enjoy some wine, I started to find differences between red wine, white wine, different grape varieties,
smelling
and so
them
on.
and just being in that environment.
Exactly.
You're naturally going to be
and took some internships in wineries. I was really focused in the theme, definitely, like even before coming to adult age, and I went to college to study agronomy, agriculture science, because there's a saying in the wine industry that wine should be made, in the vineyard,
Made in the vineyard,
not in the cellar.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I really like to apply to whiskey as well.
Yeah.
And soon, because I was living in Lisbon back then, and I couldn't make wine in Lisbon, let's say. So I found out with 18 years old that I could brew beer at home, and I was like fascinated with the kind of like the creativity that I could put just at basically in my flat. So started to brew beer in first year of college. Got a part-time job as assistant brewer in a craft brewery in Lisbon. I mean, maybe I wouldn't qualify that as a job because my salary was literally just equipment and ingredients to brew,
get going,
to get going.
Yeah.
But I changed from agriculture to food science and engineering, so I could study more topics related to fermentation, flavor development, and it was amazing. It was super fun because we didn't not only look to these kind of products, but also to, let's say, we had lectures of tasting different chocolates and
so just flavor development and
exactly. Even just looking to different waters and what different water compositions taste like. So it was a really mind-opening for me. And after my bachelor, I worked as a winemaker for a while brewing beer on the side, and then I wanted to get more serious when it comes to dealing with grains, and I moved to Scotland to study brewing and distilling for my master's degree, and distilling was always something that appealed to me, but not, let's say, in a like super passionate way. Back in the beginning, because I was way more into kind of fermented beverages. But as for me, again, what drives me is flavor experiences, the experience of enjoying a great lunch with family and friends, and finishing with the spirits, with the digestive is just incredible as well. So let's go to Scotland and study some
the
spirits as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and when I arrived to spirits, or when I started to taste all the diversity of spirits, Scotch whiskey, American whiskey, Irish, Japanese, and brandies and so on, I just found like so much creativity and that could be explored, and the flavor complexity, the dimensions, the concentration and complexity of these spirits was so mind-blowing that I was fully converted. What I really like to do is to cross concepts between different areas. Let's say roast coffee beans with some like kind of like wine techniques in mind, or apply, for example, brewing fermentation techniques to whiskey making, or understand what kind of a wine barrel impacts a whiskey. I mean, it's not only about the flavor; it's about like the chemical structure, the tannins, the compositions, and the environments as well.
So you obviously with Fielden, what's we've got a rye here in front of us. Rye is maybe not seen as much in the UK and from a distillation perspective as a grain base. I'm from Canada, and that's what we're known for. That's what we kind of marketed and stamped our approval on. But you are, what's fascinating at Fielden, maybe we can talk a little bit about that, is really taking that fascination you have about how those flavors develop from various entities, and actually then applying that to whiskey, which I think maybe a lot of people have been exploring on the cask side. So how does this cask affect a finished whiskey, but maybe not how does it affect it from the very get-go? So what are you looking at the moment in terms of different types of grains? I know we've got a rye here, but there are other grains that you explore as well, or within the process.
Yes. So, well, rye is our main grain that we work with, and one of the reasons for that is rye can cross-pollinate in the field, in a kind of technical term. So by having two varieties of rye, the next generation or the harvest will be innumerous combinations
Ah.
of those genes together.
they keep-
basically,
okay.
be a family,
Yeah.
the descendants.
Yeah.
Corn or maize has the same characteristics. So rye, in a way, for us is an ambassador for diversity, and is what really we like to explore is fields with life, diversity, and we believe that in diversity there's strength and also flavor. But because again, we like to explore diversity. We work with wheat as well, barley, and barley being 6-row, 2-row barley,
Right.
4-row barley.
So most of the Scotch whisky industry just works with one type, right? Rather than
Yes.
multiple
Well,
variations.
Usually, the whiskey industry works with, let's say, around like 10 different varieties of barley,
Yeah.
Either being 2-row or 6-row, depending what whiskey you're producing, if it's single malt or if
Yeah.
it's grain whiskey. But we like to basically look into all varieties and blend them all together.
Right. Okay. So
In
you've
the
got
same
that.
field, so you have kind of like a field blend.
Yes. Yeah.
And we also have been exploring other grains like einkorn, spelt.
Einkorns, yeah.
We produce some maize as well. We released a corn whiskey in the past. And what we also are experimenting with is how actually works the symbiosis between, say, rye grown with wheat or barley grown with wheat,
Okay.
and understand like not different varieties, but actually different species
Right,
growing
okay.
together,
Yeah.
and how one can benefit the other. For example, with rye, our rye fields, they grow quite tall. The straw is quite thick. It goes really, really, really high, and then with heavy winds, can be fragile, and that's a huge problem. Although if you grow rye with wheat, the wheat grows typically a bit shorter, so that can actually support the rye.
It's like a buffer to like
Yes.
keep them standing up. Fascinating. And from a more of that regenerative farming aspect, which you talk a lot about, certainly on the website and just generally in conversations, what is the kind of focus of that? How is that working? Are you working with different farms and helping them replant their farmland? Are you working with farmers who are already doing this? Where is that connection there?
Well, a bit of everything. I think we look to Fielden, or we look to whiskey as a vehicle for the messaging that we want to get across, which is it's possible to farm grains in a sustainable way. And we don't own any lands. And we just work with farmers, and we like to work with farmers that have been farming conventionally for their entire lives, as we also like to work with farmers that have been playing with organic, farmers that have been trying biodynamic techniques as well, to understand how that influences the growing, how it influences the journey of regenerating the land to ecological, sustainable point or state. And the majority of farms that we have been working with have been conventional, although always willing and already trying in some areas better ways of farming.
Okay.
So if it's organic or if it's regenerative.
Yeah.
There's a lot of certification out there. We are not certified at the moment. We were certified at some point, organic certified, but there's still there's a movement going on when it comes to building regenerative agriculture and trying to define what actually it is, because
Right.
there's no definition at the moment. I guess for me, regenerative agriculture is basically a set of natural practices that allow the farmland to become a better place than when we found it.
Right. Okay. So helping that soil to be in a healthier place, the biodiversity of the flora and fauna actually kind of building into a space where it's being able to be used for many generations rather
Yes,
than down
absolutely.
the line. Yeah.
Yeah, because we can own land, but it's not really ours, right? So kind of like it just the land is, we're just borrowing it from kind of previous generations.
Yeah.
And it's about the soil, it's about the diversity, it's about basically promoting an ecosystem that is stable and can thrive by itself.
Right, yeah.
In a way that's...
without the need for chemicals or fertilizers or
well,
things.
ideally, without the need for humans. I guess farming, it implies that humans will intervene. And of course, we want to extract the crops we desire. In our case, it will be grain. But in the process of doing so, we also, for example, sow different plants, not only grain. For example, cover crops.
Is clover one?
Yes.
I feel like I read a little bit. You're doing a lot of clover,
Well, you know that they do. You seem that you know a lot about farming.
I grew up on a farm, so I'm always fascinated with where these things come from and how it's affecting. Because I think when it comes to whiskey making, we're so focused on, as I said, that maturation, the casks. Once it's off the still, it's how is that developing along the line? But not many people at the moment are having as much of a discussion point about what actually goes into making whiskey. And I think sometimes that does get forgotten about. We do have some whiskey in our glass in front of us. This is a rye. So what I'm also curious about is, how do these techniques help to impact the final product in the glass? Because obviously our listeners, if they want to go out and buy a bottle of Fielden, what is it that they're going to experience that is partly because of the land from which the grains came from?
We are in still very early stages to understand the real impact.
Right. Yeah.
That's better ways of farming having actually the flavor of a whiskey.
Yeah.
I mean, whiskey gets its flavor for so many different steps of the process, not only the grain, but also the fermentation, distillation, and casks, and time as well. But it's known that having a richer environment, a richer ecosystem, more natural way of farming will give you higher density of nutrients in the crops that you get. You can see that specifically with vegetables or legumes. With grain, we are at the moment studying that impact.
Okay.
But one interesting aspect of that you can actually feel right now in the whiskey is because we, instead of just growing one single plant in a field, let's say growing one single variety of rye, we grow hundreds, and they're always crossing and multiplying, and so we cannot really quantify how many different types of rye grow in the field. There will be smaller ones, bulbier, more kind of like pales, others will be greener. So when you get hands on I should have brought some grain to show. When you actually get to see the grains, it's just whoa. I mean, you cannot really find two exactly the same. What that impacts in the process is that during the milling they will crush in different ways, and also all these different grains will have different set of chemical composition that then will influence how fermentation will happen, different ratios of protein to starch, sugars, and also how the liquids behaves in terms of as a fluid, like the viscosity, and therefore also distillation will be different. So in the end, the perception we get from whiskey produced from these grains is basically quite a complex and diverse range of flavors.
Does that mean the flavors in the bottle will also shift from bottling to bottling? Or do you try and keep more of a consistent flavor profile in the end bottle? That must be hard. You must be like, I just want to have all the different.
What shall I say? No. So because we're dealing in so many different varieties and so many different fields as well. I mean, this year we farmed 2,000 acres of farmland across the country. So blending the majority of them together and then producing some whiskey, and then after a few years blending all that whiskey into a batch and then bottle it, the consistency is there. Because kind of like all these kind of rainbow of flavors will act as a buffer across the time as well, because although these grains keep adapting, they kind of like naturally express similar attributes. Although one thing that we are very keen to explore is how applying this population of grains to different places and allow each place to evolve, and basically you start with a mother, and then different locations will develop into different populations. So it would be very, very good to actually see the difference.
Yeah, down the line as you start to
it's
get
almost
more
like
that
expressing
dominant data,
terroir in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we're still far from achieving
early stages. Yeah, absolutely. But of course, we're seeing a lot more distilleries opening up here in England, which is great. You're working with a few different distilleries from the production perspective, so you're doing contract distilling. Is that correct? So it's but they're doing it to your specification, which is quite common in the industry. When you look across the world of English whiskey, I suppose, even some of the newer entrants into the Scottish space, are you seeing more of a focus and interest in sustainability, or is it still kind of in the early stages of that?
No, absolutely. There's a lot of being done when it comes to sustainability in whiskey all over the world. I mean, we like to see ourselves as whiskey makers, not as farm distilleries. Or distillers, but there are a lot of farm distillers out there in UK, in Ireland, in US as well, and Canada, and there's a special attention to let's say the packaging. You can see that across the whole industry, people are paying more attention to, let's say, how many liters of water you use per liter of whiskey, and especially it's really good to see nowadays is more and more projects to pay more attention to the raw materials. You have very good examples of whiskeys that are produced from organic grain, whiskeys produced from heritage grains as well, and also how you grow that grain. I mean, you have even biodynamic whiskey. I mean, I never thought
you would ever see those terms
like 10
connected.
years ago that didn't come up. So
well, thanks to the wine industry, because I think the wine industry pushed that a lot, didn't it? And then that's helping to spread into other arenas in the drinks world. So,
yeah, absolutely. And I think the most important thing to realize is that in order to make a bottle of whiskey, you need around 1 kilo of grain. You can imagine that 1 kilo of grain is quite. I mean, it's quite a lot.
It's quite a lot, yes. For
so
everything,
you're
how many bottles are out there?
So much energy because matter and energy and into a spirit. That's I mean that's why it's called a spirit. To start with, I mean, it's the spirit of something, spirit of grain. So I think it's because nowadays people also want to they don't just want to to enjoy, or they just don't want to drink or to consume spirit. They want a story behind it.
Yeah, absolutely.
They want to be able to talk about it, to discuss, and that's kind of like a part of all the enjoyment as well. And so that's
if you're going to invest in a slightly more expensive product or a bottle of whiskey, what is going into it? What are you actually, where is that cost coming in? And I think it is really important for consumers to understand that there are certain brands out there who are really taking it seriously and spending the time and energy in researching and helping to make it, better for the future as well. Down the line.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And I was going to say that I mean, because it's with whiskey that two people can spend more time actually discussing what we are enjoying.
I'm going to give this a smell.
For us, it's the perfect vehicle to spread the messaging about farming and the ways of farming. Because let's say bread or beer might not cross borders so well as whiskey. I mean, whiskey literally stay well forever, pretty much.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I'm giving this a smell. It's absolutely glorious. Those people out there maybe who haven't had a rye whiskey before, because again, you might have had a rye if you've had something come in from Canada or the US or maybe the Nordics, which are doing a bit more rye production. But what are some of the kind of classic notes you would say that you get on more of a rye-based whiskey?
So rye is really famous for its spiciness. The spice character is expressed in aroma, but also in taste. And rye can also be quite because if it's spicy, sometimes it's seen as like a quite aggressive, although works amazing well for cocktails.
Yes, yeah.
I love
a rye old fashioned. I've definitely used some of that Fielden. It's gone into some excellent old fashions that I have at home.
But rye is quite versatile in a way. Rye can be quite herbal as well. A lot of kind of mint coming forward, some herbaceous notes, especially in Fielden. Fielden expresses quite a lot of herbaceousness. If that's related to all the different plants that not grain that grows in the fields, I don't know. I'm not watching for that. But can be quite herbal, can be quite floral as well, and usually quite citrusy. I find our Fielden rye a bit more kind of appley, a bit like apple custards, quite pastry. I would say that Fielden is not the classical rye you might imagine from
it's got
from
a lot
Canada,
of floral
from
fruitiness.
the US, but it's definitely the one we're producing. in the beginning, we didn't know if it was going to be okay. But actually, it turns out to be amazing. So
it's beautiful.
I'm really happy with it.
Well, I can definitely say I'll raise a glass of that and cheers.
Thank you.
And thank you, Chico, so much for joining us. It's been really fascinating to understand more about what you're doing at Fielden and all of the exciting projects. So I'm sure if anybody wants to find out more, you guys have a lot of information on the website about kind of your planning, your practices, how it's all working. I really highly recommend people read the blogs as well. The notes section is really fascinating. Some great stories there. But for anybody else out there who's listening, what's one thing I guess you would want people to know about Fielden that makes you special?
Wow. I think we are on a journey, and I think we are on a journey together with everyone. So we don't like to see ourselves apart from anyone. We just, I think for us, the measure for success is having more people to do what we do. And we're just in the beginning. We'll see where it goes.
Amazing, exciting. Well, thank you so much, Chico. It's great, and I'm gonna finish off with a little sip of this. So, cheers.
Thank you.
That's delightful.